The Galactic Concord had existed for 12,000 years. It was a great alliance of 847 different alien species. They had rules older than human civilization. They had technology that humans could only dream about. They had power that stretched across millions of stars. When humanity finally built ships that could travel between stars, the aliens watched with mild interest. Humans were new. Humans were young. Humans lived such short lives compared to most species. The aliens saw humanity the way an adult might. See a child learning to walk? Cute, harmless, not important. The Volanthi Dominion was one of the oldest species in the Concord. They were tall creatures with scales like emeralds and eyes that never blinked. They moved slowly and spoke carefully. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for longer than humans had existed as a species. When they offered humanity a gift, everyone thought it was a sign of welcome. The gift was a planet called Illusaur 7. It was beautiful beyond words. The sky was painted in shades of purple and gold. The air was clean and sweet. Rivers of crystal-clear water ran through valleys filled with flowers that glowed softly at night. It was paradise. It was perfect for humans. 50,000 people volunteered to be the first colonists. They came from every nation on Earth. Scientists and farmers. Teachers and builders. Families with young children and elderly couples seeking adventure in their final years. They packed their belongings, said goodbye to everyone they loved, and traveled across the stars to build a new home. They called their settlement New Harmony. For 3 years, New Harmony grew and flourished. The colonists built homes with wide windows to watch the alien sunsets. They planted gardens where Earth vegetables grew alongside strange alien fruits. Children ran through lavender meadows, laughing and playing games. Scientists studied the local plants and animals, making discoveries that amazed researchers. Back on Earth, dreams took root in the alien soil and began to bloom. Maria Santos was a teacher. Every morning, she walked to the small school building and taught 32 children about mathematics and history and the importance of kindness. She loved watching their faces light up when they understood something new. David Okafor was an engineer. He spent his days making sure the water systems worked perfectly and the power grid stayed stable. He spent his evenings teaching his twin daughters to play chess. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was a medical researcher. She was close to a breakthrough that could help aliens and humans share medicine. She believed that science could bring different species together as friends. Lily Foster was 6 years old. She had a gap-toothed smile and a stuffed bear named Captain Fuzzy. She drew pictures of what she thought aliens looked like, giving them big, friendly eyes and happy smiles. These were real people with real lives and real dreams. Then one day, the colony went silent. Earth tried to contact New Harmony. There was no response. They tried again and again. Nothing. Just silence, where there had once been laughter and conversation and life. The United Earth government sent rescue ships immediately. They traveled as fast as their engines could push them. The crews prepared for anything: disease, natural disaster, equipment failure. They brought doctors and supplies and hope. What they found broke them. New Harmony was empty. The buildings stood untouched. The gardens still grew. Food sat on tables half-eaten, as if people had simply stood up mid-meal and walked away. Toys lay scattered in yards. Books sat open on chairs. A chess game waited for someone to make the next move. Everything was there, except the people. 50,000 human beings had vanished without a trace. There were no bodies. There were no signs of struggle. There were no clues about what had happened. It was as if someone had reached down and simply erased every human from existence while leaving everything else behind. The Galactic Concord sent their condolences. Many alien species expressed shock and sadness. The Volanthi were especially sympathetic. They called it a terrible tragedy. They promised a full investigation. They said they would find answers. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was sent to oversee the human side of the investigation. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent 30 years studying alien cultures and politics. She knew how to read between the lines of what aliens said, what they actually meant. Alina walked through the empty streets of New Harmony. She entered homes where families had lived and loved. She stood in the school where Maria Santos had taught children to count. She visited the medical lab where Dr. Tanaka had worked on her research in the nursery of a small home. Alina found a stuffed bear sitting on a bed. A name was stitched on its collar, Captain Fuzzy. She picked it up and held it gently. Thinking about the little girl who had loved it, that was when she noticed something strange. In the corner of the nursery, hidden behind a panel, there was a piece of equipment that should not have been there. Alina recognized it from her studies. It was Valenthi technology, an atmospheric processor. But this one was different from normal models. It had been modified. Alina contacted her team. Within hours, they found more hidden devices throughout the colony. All of them were Valenthi equipment. All of them had been modified to release a specific compound into the air. Scientists analyzed the compound and made a horrible discovery. The chemical affected human biology and nothing else. It broke down human cellular structure at the molecular level. The process was fast. The colonists would have felt nothing. One moment they were alive, and the next moment they simply ceased to exist. Their bodies dissolved into nothing. That was why there were no remains. This was not a mystery. This was not a tragedy. This was not an accident. This was murder. 50,000 innocent people had been deliberately killed. The Valenthi had given humanity a paradise, and then they had used it as a trap. The investigation, the sympathy, the promises, all of it was lies. Alina stood in that nursery, holding a dead child's toy, and felt something change inside her. Grief and shock transformed into something harder, something colder, something that would not rest until justice was done. She understood now what the galaxy really thought of humanity. They were not welcomed guests. They were not potential friends. They were pests to be eliminated, problems to be solved. Their lives meant nothing to the ancient powers who ruled the stars. But the ancient powers had made a mistake. They had assumed that killing humans was easy because humans were weak. They had assumed that humans would mourn and then move on, because humans lived such short lives. They did not understand what they had awakened. Ambassador. Alina Vasquez looked up at the alien stars and made a silent promise to 50,000 souls. She promised them that the galaxy would learn their names. She promised them that the galaxy would remember what happened here. She promised them justice, and humanity always kept its promises. Earth received the news in silence. There were no riots. There were no immediate calls for war. Instead, something deeper happened. 8 billion people stopped what they were doing and simply felt the weight of what had been done to their kind. Mothers held their children closer that night. Fathers sat quietly, staring at nothing. Strangers on the street looked at each other with new understanding. 50,000 people were gone. 50,000 members of the human family had been erased by creatures who thought humans did not matter. The grief was overwhelming, but it did not break humanity. It changed them. Admiral James Okonkwo was appointed commander of the United Earth Defense Fleet 3 days after the truth about New Harmony became known. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a voice that made people want to listen. He had served in space for 30 years. He had seen things that would give most people nightmares. But nothing had prepared him for this. His first order surprised everyone. He did not call for weapons production. He did not demand new warships. Instead, he ordered the creation of the memorial database. Every person who had died on New Harmony would be remembered, not as a number, not as a statistic. As a real human being, with a real story, teams of researchers worked day and night. They contacted families. They gathered photographs. They collected memories and stories and dreams. They built a record of 50,000 lives. Aisha Chen was 7 years old. She wanted to be a xenobiologist when she grew up. She loved butterflies and spent hours watching the alien insects on Lisaru 7. Her mother said she could name every species. Marcus Webb was 34. He taught the children of New Harmony to play guitar. He believed that music was a universal language that could connect all species. He was writing a song that mixed human melodies with alien harmonies. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was 62. She was 3 days away from announcing a breakthrough in cross-species medicine. Her research could have saved millions of alien lives. The Volanthi had killed her before she could share it with the galaxy. David Okafor was 41. His twin daughters, Amara and Zara, were 8 years old. They had just learned to play chess. Their favorite piece was the knight because it moved in unexpected ways. Lily Foster was 6. She loved her stuffed bear, Captain Fuzzy. She drew pictures of friendly aliens. She believed that everyone in the galaxy could be friends if they just tried hard enough. Every name had a story. Every story was shared. Humanity broadcast these memorials across every open communication channel in the galaxy. 24 hours a day, 7 days. A week, the names and faces of the fallen filled the airwaves. Aliens who had never thought about humans before suddenly found themselves confronted with the reality of what had been lost. The Rithani ambassador was confused. His species lived for thousands of years. They did not understand why humans spent so much energy on the dead. Why do they do this? He asked his colleague. The dead are gone. Logic demands moving forward. This behavior is inefficient, but the Scilethi observer understood something the Rithani did not. The Scilethi were empaths. They could feel the emotions of other beings. And when she felt what was flowing from human space, she trembled with fear. They are not mourning, she told the Rithani. They are building. Building what? A foundation. A reason. A purpose that will not fade with time. The Scilethi had studied humans for decades. She knew that humans were strange creatures. They formed deep attachments. They felt emotions with terrifying intensity. They remembered things long after other species would have forgotten. She had always seen these as weaknesses. Now she understood they were weapons. Meanwhile, human intelligence agents began their work. They were patient. They were careful. They were very, very good at finding secrets that others wanted to keep hidden. Captain Sarah Kim led a team of analysts who specialized in alien communications. They studied Volanthi encrypted messages. They traced financial transactions through dozens of shell corporations. They interviewed traders and diplomats and anyone else who might have information. It took months of careful work, but slowly, as the truth began to emerge, the Volanthi had not acted alone. The Galactic Concord had a structure that most species did not know about. On the surface, it was a democracy where all 847 species had equal voices. But beneath that surface was something older and darker. The Inner Circle. 5 species had founded the Concord 12,000 years ago. They had written the rules. They had built the systems. And they had quietly maintained control ever since. They met in secret. They made decisions that affected trillions of lives. They believed they knew what was best for the galaxy. When humanity appeared, the Inner Circle watched with growing concern. Humans advanced too quickly. They adapted to Isley. They asked too many questions. They did not accept the natural order of things. The Inner Circle held a secret vote. The decision was unanimous. Humanity was a threat to galactic stability. Humanity needed to be controlled. If control was not possible, humanity needed to be eliminated. New harmony was a test. The Inner Circle wanted to see if humans could be killed quietly. They wanted to see how the rest of the galaxy would react. They wanted to see if humanity would simply accept their place and stay small and weak. The plan had more phases. If the test succeeded, other human colonies would follow. Eventually, Earth itself would be targeted. The Inner Circle had a timeline. Within 300 years, humanity would exist only in history books. Captain Kim presented her findings to Admiral Okonkwo in a secure room deep beneath Earth's surface. The evidence was overwhelming. Communications between Inner Circle members, scientific data about the weapon used on New Harmony, plans for future attacks, timelines for human extinction, OKONKWO. Read the report in silence. When he finished, he looked up at Kim with eyes that held a terrible calm. How many species know about this conspiracy? Most of the Concord has no idea. The inner circle has kept it completely secret. If this information became public, it would tear the Concord apart. Conquo nodded slowly. Then, we need to make sure it becomes public at exactly the right moment. In exactly the right way, stood and walked to a window that showed the stars above Earth. Somewhere out there, ancient powers were planning the death of his species. They thought humans were weak. They thought humans would never discover the truth. They thought they could murder 50,000 innocent people and face no consequences. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Begin preparations, Okonkwo said quietly. Humanity is going to demand justice, and this time, the galaxy will listen. The Scythe had been right. Humans were building something. They were building a case. They were building alliances. They were building a moment when everything would change, and they were doing it all while carrying 50,000 names in their hearts. The galaxy had the idea what was coming. The Grand Convocation was the highest assembly in galactic civilization. All 847 species could attend. Decisions made there affected trillions of lives across millions of worlds. It was only called during times of great importance. The last Grand Convocation had been held 300 years ago. Humanity called for one now. The request shocked the Concord. Newcomers did not call Grand Convocations. Young species did not make demands of ancient civilizations. The proper way to handle disputes was through quiet diplomacy and patient negotiation. That was how things had always been done. But humanity did not care about how things had always been done. The Volanthi High Regent, a massive creature named Taraxis, argued against allowing the convocation. He said humans were emotional and unstable. He said they would make wild accusations without proof. He said the Concord should not waste its time on the complaints of a species that had only been in space for a few decades. But other species were curious. They wanted to know what humanity had to say. They wanted to understand why a small, young species was willing to challenge the entire galactic order. The vote was held, and the convocation was approved. The celestial chamber was the largest structure in the known galaxy. It floated in space at the exact center of Concord territory. Its walls were made of crystal that had been harvested from dying stars. Its ceiling showed the real-time positions of every inhabited world. Representatives from every species could fit inside, each in their own section designed for their specific biology. Ambassador Elena Vasquez entered the chamber alone. She was one human woman facing thousands of alien delegates. Many of them had never seen a human in person before. They stared at her with eyes and sensors and appendages of every possible type. Some were curious, some were amused, some were hostile. The Volanthi delegation sat in an elevated position of honor, as befitting one of the founding species. High Regent Taraxis looked down at Alina with cold, unblinking eyes. His scales seemed to shimmer with contempt. "I requested this convocation," Taraxis announced, his voice booming through the chamber. "Speak your piece, human. But know that you have no standing here. You are newcomers. Children in a universe of elders. Whatever grievances you think you have, they mean nothing compared to the wisdom of species who ruled the stars while your ancestors still lived in caves." Alina stood perfectly still. She let the insult wash over her without reaction. She had expected this. She had prepared for this. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times. "Thank you, High Regent, for that warm welcome," she said. Her voice was calm and clear, amplified, so that every delegate could hear. "You are correct that humanity is young. You are correct that we have only recently joined the galactic community. But you are wrong about one thing." She paused, letting the silence build. "We are not here to complain. We are not here to beg. We are not here to make demands." Taraxis made a sound that might have been laughter. "Then why are you here, little human?" "We are here to inform you of what will happen next." Lena raised her hand, and the air above her filled with holographic images, documents, communications, scientific data, testimonies. The evidence that humanity had spent months gathering appeared before the entire galaxy 18 months ago. 50,000 human colonists on Illusaura 7 were murdered. Not killed by accident. Not lost to natural disaster. Murdered. Deliberately, systematically, by Velanthi technology, hidden beneath their homes. The chamber erupted in noise. Hundreds of species shouted and clicked and hummed their shock. But Alina continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. The weapon used was an atmospheric compound designed to affect only human biology. It dissolved our people at the molecular level. They felt nothing. They simply ceased to exist. This is the scientific analysis performed by 17 independent research teams, including teams from species with no connection to humanity. More evidence appeared. Chemical formulas, autopsy simulations, technical specifications of the hidden devices. But the murder of 50,000 innocents was not the worst part. The worst part is that the Velanthi did not act alone. Now the chamber fell silent. Every eye and sensor and attention focused on Alina. For 12,000 years, this Concord has operated on the belief that all species are equal, that all voices matter. That justice applies to everyone. Alina's voice grew harder. That is a lie. She displayed communications between the inner circle species, secret meetings, encrypted messages, plans that stretched back centuries. The evidence was undeniable. The cover-up was exposed. 5 species have secretly controlled this Concord since its founding. They have manipulated events. They have suppressed technologies. They have eliminated species they considered threats. And they decided, in a secret vote, that humanity should be exterminated. Chaos that followed was unlike anything the Celestial Chamber had ever seen. Species who had trusted the Concord for millennia suddenly questioned everything they knew. Alliances that had lasted for centuries cracked and splintered. Delegates screamed accusations at the inner circle species demanding answers. Through it all, the Velanthi High Regent sat frozen, his scales pale with shock. He had never expected humans to discover the truth. He had never expected them to present it to the entire galaxy. He had underestimated them completely. When the noise finally died down, Alina spoke again. We do not want war. We do not want revenge. We want justice. She listed humanity's terms first. Full acknowledgement of the atrocity, broadcast to every world in the Concord. Second, the architects of the massacre to face public trial for their crimes. Third, reparations for the families of the fallen. Fourth, humanity's elevation to full Concord membership with veto power over any decisions affecting human interests. Fifth, the names of all 50,000 victims to be inscribed on the walls of the Celestial Chamber itself. Every delegate, for as long as the Concord existed, would walk past those names. They would never be allowed to forget what had been done. You have one standard galactic week to comply, Alina concluded. High Regent Toraxis finally found his voice. His words dripped with contempt. Or what? Human. You have 40 ships. We have 40,000. Your military is nothing compared to ours. What exactly do you think you can do to us? Alina smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who held cards that no one else knew about. That, she said quietly, is exactly what you are about to find out. She turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving chaos behind her. Representatives from dozens of species tried to follow her, shouting questions. Guards struggled to maintain order. The foundations of galactic civilization trembled, and somewhere in human space, Admiral Okonkwo watched the broadcast and nodded slowly. Phase 1 was complete. The galaxy knew the truth. Now came the hard part. Humanity had 1 week to bend the galaxy to its will. 1 week to prove that 50,000 lives mattered. 1 week to show ancient powers that some things could not be erased, or forgotten, or ignored. The countdown had begun. The galaxy expected humanity to threaten, to shout, to make noise, and then quietly accept whatever scraps of justice the Concord offered. That was what young species did. They complained, they were ignored, and eventually they learned their place. Humanity went quiet instead. For the first day after the Grand Convocation, human ships stayed in their positions. Human channels broadcast only the memorial database. the endless stream of names and faces and stories. The galaxy watched and waited for the next move. Nothing happened. By the second day, the Volanthi High Regent felt confident. He told his advisors that the humans had made their little speech and now they would realize they had no real power. The Inner Circle species began discussing how to manage the political damage while maintaining their control. They had survived crises before. They would survive this one. Then the messages started arriving. The merchants. Collective was the economic backbone of galactic civilization. They handled trade between species. They maintained the financial systems that kept the economy running. They were strictly neutral in political matters because money did not care about politics. On the second day, the collective received a detailed analysis from human economists. It was not a threat. It was simply information. The analysis showed exactly how the galactic economy worked. It identified 17 supply chains where human products or services had become essential over the past few decades. It calculated what would happen if humans suddenly withdrew from those supply chains. The numbers were terrifying. Human withdrawal would not cause immediate collapse, but it would create shortages. Those shortages would cause price increases. Those price increases would trigger economic instability across 340 different species. The collective ran their own analysis and confirmed that the human calculations were accurate. The report included a note at the end. It said that humans believed in fair trade and had no intention of disrupting galactic commerce. It said this information was being shared purely for educational purposes. The collective understood the message. Humans were not threatening to destroy the economy. They were simply proving that they could. On the third day, human scientists released a paper about the long-range communication network that connected the galaxy. This network had been built by the Inner Circle species thousands of years ago. Everyone depended on it. Without it, ships could not navigate, governments could not coordinate, and civilization would fragment into isolated pockets. The paper revealed that the network had a critical flaw. A specific type of energy pulse could disable it for months. The flaw had existed since the network was built, but no one had ever discovered it before. Human scientists, with their fresh perspective and desperate motivation, had found it in weeks. The paper also mentioned that human engineers had already modified Earth's communication systems to be immune to this flaw. If the network failed tomorrow, humans would be the only species still able to talk to each other across stellar distances. Again, the paper included a polite note. Humans had no intention of exploiting this vulnerability. They were sharing the information so that other species could protect themselves. It was simply a public service. The Inner Circle species read that paper. It felt real fear for the first time. On the fourth day, something even more unsettling began. Human diplomats started sending private messages to species outside the Inner Circle. Each message was personalized. Each message contained information about how the Inner Circle had manipulated that specific species over the centuries. The Korvathi learned that a plague which had killed millions of their people had been deliberately created by Inner Circle scientists to keep Korvathi population under control. The Rithani discovered that their entire religious structure had been engineered by Inner Circle sociologists to make them obedient and passive. Scilethi found evidence that their empathic abilities had been suppressed through genetic manipulation because the Inner Circle feared what the Scilethi might sense about their true intentions. Every species received different information. Every revelation was backed by solid evidence. Every secret destroyed trust that had taken thousands of years to build. The humans were not fighting a war. They were telling the truth. And the truth was more destructive than any weapon. By the fifth day, the Concord was falling apart. Species that had never questioned the established order were demanding answers. The Volanthi found themselves isolated. Their trading partners reconsidered agreements. Their allies backed away. No one wanted to be associated with the architects of genocide. The Inner Circle called an emergency meeting. They considered using military force against humanity. They had overwhelming numbers. They could crush human civilization in days. But Admiral Okonkwo had anticipated this. On the fifth day, He sent a simple message to every military commander in the Concord. The message contained evidence that Inner Circle species had been stealing military technology from other species for centuries. Ships that smaller species thought they had invented themselves had actually been designed by Inner Circle engineers and planted for others to discover. Species believed they had their own independent military. Now they learned that all their weapons had been designed by the same hands. Hands that could disable those weapons at will. Military options evaporated. On the 6th day, the Silithi ambassador requested a private meeting with Admiral Okonkwo. She was trembling when she arrived. Her empathic abilities were overwhelmed by the emotions she sensed from human space. "How did you do this?" she asked. "We monitored your communications. We watched your government meetings. We tracked your military movements. There was no sign of any grand strategy. No central plan. No coordination." Okonkwo showed her a photograph. It was a human child with a gap-toothed smile, holding a drawing of what she imagined aliens would look like. The name Lily Foster was written in the corner. Her name was Lily Foster, Okonkwo said quietly. She was 6 years old. She believed that everyone in the galaxy could be friends if they just tried hard enough. He looked at the Silithi with eyes that held no hatred, only determination. Every human knows at least one name from New Harmony. We carry them with us. When we go to sleep, we remember them. When we wake up, we remember them. We do not need central coordination because we share something stronger than any command structure. What is that? Grief. Purpose. The absolute refusal to let 50,000 innocent people be forgotten. The Silithi understood then what the galaxy had failed to see. Humans did not need a conspiracy because they had something better. They had a shared wound that connected every single one of them. 8 billion people, united by sorrow and determination, all working toward the same goal without needing to be told what to do. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was unstoppable. "The vote tomorrow," the Silithi whispered. "It will pass, won't it?" Okonkwo nodded slowly. "The Concord will do what is right. Not because humans forced them, but because we made doing wrong the harder choice." The 7th day dawned. The longest week was over. Now came the judgment. The celestial chamber was full again. Every species had sent their representatives. Every seat was occupied. The air hummed with tension and anticipation. This was the moment that would define the future of galactic civilization. High Regent Taraxis sat in his elevated position, but he looked smaller than before. His scales had lost their shine. His eyes, which had once held such contempt for humanity, now showed something different. Fear, uncertainty, the knowledge that his world was about to change forever. The vote was called. Species after species cast their decision. The numbers appeared on the great display that hung above the chamber. Yes or no. Support humanity's demands or reject them. The Korvathi voted yes. They remembered the plague that had killed millions of their people. They remembered the lies they had been told about its cause. The Rathani voted yes. They had spent centuries believing in a religion that had been manufactured to control them. Now they wanted truth. The Silithi voted yes. Their empaths had felt the grief and determination of humanity, and they had recognized something pure in those emotions. Something worth protecting? Even species with no direct grievance against the Inner Circle voted yes. They had watched humanity's actions during the longest week. They had seen courage and intelligence and an unwavering commitment to justice. They wanted that spirit in the Concord. They wanted humanity as an ally. The final count was overwhelming. 802 species voted yes. 43 abstained. Only 2 species, both members of the Inner Circle, voted no. It was not even close. The Velanthi High Regent and 16 of his co-conspirators were immediately taken into custody. They would face trial before a court made up of species from every corner of the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, the powerful would be held accountable for their crimes against the weak. 3 of the 5 Inner Circle species voluntarily dissolved their privileged status. Their representatives admitted to centuries of manipulation and deception. They asked for forgiveness, though they knew it might never come. Reparations were approved for the families of the fallen. Every human who had lost someone on New Harmony would receive support for the rest of their lives. It was not enough to replace what had been taken, but it was an acknowledgement that those lives had value. Humanity was granted full membership in the Concord, along with a permanent seat on the newly reformed council. No decision affecting human interests could be made without human consent. The species that had been scheduled for extinction was now one of the most powerful voices in galactic politics. But for the humans watching across 100 worlds, the moment that mattered most came later, in the center of the celestial chamber, where the most important decisions in galactic history had been made. Construction beings began their work. They were artisans who specialized in permanent memorials. They used tools that could shape the hardest materials in the universe. They began to carve names into the ancient walls. Aisha, Chen, Marcus Webb, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, David Okafor, Amara Okafor, Zara, FOR. Lily Foster, name after name appeared on the crystal walls. Each letter was cut deep, filled with light that would shine for millions of years. The work would take months to complete. 50,000 names required 50,000 individual inscriptions. From this day forward, every delegate who entered the celestial chamber would walk past those names. Every decision would be made in the presence of those who had been lost. Every species would be reminded forever of what happened when innocent lives were treated as worthless. Ambassador. Alina Vasquez stood in the chamber as the first names were carved. Admiral Okonkwo stood beside her. Human observers from Earth and the colonies watched through broadcast feeds. No one spoke. No one needed to dot. Alien delegates kept their distance, watching the humans with new understanding. Many of them could not comprehend the tears streaming down human faces. Their species did not cry. They did not mourn the way humans mourned. But they recognized that something profound was happening. "They think this is our victory," Okonkwo murmured quietly. Alina shook her head. "It is not our victory. It belongs to them. The fallen, we just refuse to let their story end in silence." She thought about the nursery on Elisaru 7. She thought about a stuffed bear named Captain Fuzzy. She thought about a little girl who had believed that everyone in the galaxy could be friends. Lily. Foster had been right in a way. The galaxy was learning to be friends with humanity. But it had taken tragedy and truth and an absolute refusal to surrender for that friendship to become possible. The Scilethi ambassador approached Alina after the ceremony. Her species was known for their emotional sensitivity, but even she seemed overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. "I have studied your kind for decades," she said. "I thought I understood what made humans unique. I was wrong." "What do you understand now?" Alina asked. "Your lives are short. Your bodies are fragile. Your technology is young." Scilethi paused, searching for the right words. "But you carry your dead with you. Every loss becomes part of who you are. Every wrong becomes a weight you refuse to put down until it is made right. We thought this made you weak. We believed that grief would slow you down, that memory would hold you back." She looked at the names being carved into the wall. "We were completely wrong. It makes you unstoppable." On Elisaru 7, the colony that had once been called New Harmony was now a protected memorial site. No one would ever build there again. The homes and schools and gardens would be preserved exactly as they had been found. Frozen in the moment when 50,000 souls had been stolen from the universe, in the nursery where Alina had first discovered the truth. Captain Fuzzy sat on a shelf. Someone had placed him carefully upright, facing the window that looked out at the alien sky. Around him, holographic flowers bloomed. They were gifts from dozens of species who had traveled across the stars to pay their respects. A Corvathi diplomat had left purple crystals that sang softly in the wind. A Rathani elder had placed a written prayer in the language of her people. A Scilethi empath had created a small device that projected feelings of love and peace. The galaxy had trembled when humanity amended justice. Now it was learning to remember, learning to care, learning that some things were too important to forget. In the years that followed, humanity would become one of the most respected species in the Concord. Not because of military power or economic strength, but because of something simpler. Humans remembered. Humans cared. Humans refused to accept that cruelty was just the way things were. And every year, on the anniversary of the New Harmony Massacre, representatives from hundreds of species would gather in the celestial chamber. They would read the 50,000 names aloud, one by one. It took days to complete. No one complained, because the galaxy had finally learned what humanity had always known. Civilization without justice was merely organized cruelty. And justice without memory was nothing at all. The names glowed softly on the ancient walls. A light that would never go out. 50,000 voices finally heard. 50,000 lives. Finally honored. 50,000 reasons why the galaxy would never be the same.